Hey there, it's Simon Hurley from Inklips, and welcome to another video. It's been quite some time since I've been on here, but today I'm excited to share some interactive scratch cards. Now these are super fun, and I love interactive cards. However, sometimes they can take a little bit longer to create, and maybe a little bit too long. So today I'm going to share just some simple products that make these super easy to create, and they still have some really awesome and fun results. So for this first card, I'm going to create kind of like a lottery scratch-off card, where it reveals the sentiment afterwards. And I'm using this ornament mice stamp set from Inky Antics. It's got that ornament that fits that scratch off perfectly and those adorable little mice. But you could use whatever you want for this stamp set. So I'm going to be starting off by stamping all my images onto the cardstock. I'm building a little scene where the mouse is reaching down to make sure that ornament doesn't break. And that will be the portion where the scratch-off part goes later on in the video. However, you want to make sure you finish all your coloring and your whole card before you move on to that step. So it's kind of almost like a backward process. Now, after I was done stamping, there was a little bit of an ink splotch, so I decided to take my mono sand eraser and just erase some of that away lightly, and it removes the little spot of ink, and nobody will know, and you didn't have to restart the whole thing. So then I'm going in quickly with the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, and I'm just adding some color in where I want it to be darkest, and then blending it out with my water brush here to get that nice blended effect. Now, as I'm doing this, I used the Distress Watercolor cardstock, mainly just because it takes water nicely, and it's got that full bright white color, and I'm using lots of that background, so I wanted it to be a nice bright white. But if you're struggling getting great results from these markers and blending and things, you might want to try out Bristol cardstock. It just gives it a little bit more time to move and blend, so if you are struggling, that's a great thing to use. So now I'll color in my ornament. Now I wanted this to be just a little bit lighter since I am using this portion for my sentiment, so I wanted to make sure it was nice and readable, and I'm just blending my color out there as well. Now if you didn't want to use a water brush for this and you wanted more vibrant colors, you can always go in with just these markers and blend them together with different shades and tones, and it looks really awesome as well. Now for the background, I wanted a little bit of grounding color for this little mouse, so I added some blue that I just scribbled on, and then I watered it out into the background. And with these markers, you can really just scribble and still get great results. So then I cut it out with a Lawn Fawn cross-stitch rectangle die to add some more detail. And then I was about to add it down to this red card base, but the reds didn't quite match up with how I wanted it to look. So I decided to just go with this dark green, and I really like how that looked in the end. So I wanted to include this as kind of part of the process. So I just scored down that green card base, and then I'll add it right onto there. So that was just a little bit of change of mind there, and I love how this turned out with the green in the background. So I've added that down onto the card there, and I've added it flat so that the scratch off portion works really nicely. And then I didn't want to mess up here, so I added my sentiment onto my Misty, and that will stamp right into that little mini ornament there. And all the sentiment in this set fit really nicely inside there. So this one just says Merry Christmas. I'm going to make sure to give it nice pressure, and if I needed to, I can always double stamp it. Now here is when we're adding the scratch off part, right when we're almost done with our card. It's kind of like a backward process here, and it seems a bit weird, but it's really easy to do. I'm just using these Inky Antics scratch off stickers. Now it comes with a ton in a pack, so you can have lots of experimenting and making fun interactive cards, and there's a bunch folded up there as well. So I'm going to peel off one of these kind of silvery colored stickers here, and I just want to make sure it's nice and lined up. Now if it doesn't fit on perfectly right away, don't push it down all the way. You can always peel it back up gently to reposition it and make sure it's nice and over top of whatever you're covering. For this instance, it works perfectly right over top of that ornament there, and I'll just press that down and make sure it's nice and stuck onto the cardstock once it's on there. So then it just looks like that ornament is meant to be silver, and I think that looks pretty nice on the front of the card there. So then I'm stamping down a Scratch Gently sentiment that came with this set, just to let the recipient know exactly what to do. And I'm just going to share an example of exactly what it will look like. You just want to take a little coin and scratch really gently at the surface here to remove that gray substance at the top, kind of like a lottery scratch-off ticket. And this reveals the sentiment. Now it also puts that like glossy covering over top of whatever you're scratching so that it won't ruin whatever is underneath there that you spent your time creating. And I think it creates for a really awesome and fun card for the recipient. Now here's a little close-up of the card that I just scratched off there, and you can see that glossy surface to protect what's underneath there. Now, if you were like me and you just wanted to experiment before you sent off the card, you can try to remove that glossy sticker that's afterwards. You just want to maybe heat it up a little bit to get rid of some of that adhesive or kind of soften it. And then you can peel it back onto itself really slowly to make sure it doesn't ruin anything underneath, and then you can add a new sticker right on top. So moving on to the next card, we're creating a fun scratch and sniff, which really brings me back to my childhood here. I'm using this Christmas Pine Bears stamp set with that little bear that's pulling that tree there. I love these little images to color in. And I'll start off by stamping this down with my Misty here, and I'm using that Distress Watercolor cardstock again, mainly like I said, just because it's that nice bright white, and it does take the water pretty nicely. So I'm going to stamp this twice, and that's the bonus of having the Misty here, just so you get a nice image on top of that watercolor cardstock. So then I'll pull it out of my Misty, and instead this time I'm going to be using some Distress markers to do some watercoloring. Now I haven't used these in a while, but I do love the results. They don't blend super well out because I'm not using that Bristol cardstock here, but I do like the effect you get. You get a nice strong effect where you add the marker down and then it kind of smooths out into a nice watercolor there. So I'm just continuing to add my color down onto the surface, and then I'll just water it out with my water brush here to get that fun watercolor effect. Now you don't need both markers that I used in today's video. I was just really having fun since I hadn't used these in a little while, and they both give pretty similar results when it comes to watercoloring. So after I've added all my color onto here, we're going to move on to constructing the whole card. So I'm using these square lift up flap dies, and I'm going to be creating a little window that opens up, so it's like a double interactive card here. So 3 of these sides cut, and then one of it just kind of scores to create a little window there that will open up. So I'm going to run this through on a blue card base there. This is some G&K Designs cardstock, which I really like the colors of. And I'll run that through my die cutting machine. And then once you pull it out, it's created that little flap with a little hole in it that you can pull out. And then you can just score along that line, and it creates a little window where you can add your little critter on the inside. So this was the largest of those square lift up flap dies. Now once I've done that, I'm going to be using some score tape, which is a really strong adhesive, since I didn't want this to come undone afterwards. And I'm going to peel that off and then add my little bear image down onto the inside of that card so that it's peeking through that little window there when you open it up. And I'll just make sure that's nice and adhered down. And then once that's complete, I'm going to stamp down my sentiment, and this is going to be right below the image on the blue card base there. So I'm using my anti-static powder tool and the Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink. So then I can stamp this down, and then I'm going to be able to have my little sentiment there, and I'll add some white embossing powder to get a nice crisp white image on there. And I'll heat this up once it's done to make sure it's nice and set, and you get that really crisp image. So once that's complete, I'm just adding some little shimmer pen. This happens to be the Spectrum Noir one, but the Wink of Stella works just as well to add some glitter onto the surface there, and just some shine. Now for the scratch and sniff portion, right at the end here again, to kind of finish off the card. Now this is a scratch and sniff pine sticker. I believe they have some other scents as well from Inky Antics, but these are super fun. It brings me back to my childhood here, and they really do smell like pine. It's really kind of crazy. So I took a little clear sticker off here, and then I added it right onto my pine tree there. Now it's not really that noticeable on the card, and you can only really see it when it's tilted in the light, so it won't really obscure your image. So I'm going to adhere that down, make sure it's nice and stuck down there, and then I'll add the scratch and sniff stamp just in a really light ink gently above it, so once again the recipient knows exactly what to do. So here's a close-up of that card. It's got that fun little window flap, and then also it's got that scratch and sniff sticker. And let me tell you, this thing actually smells really good like a little pine tree. So here is a closer look at those 2 interactive cards that we created. I hope you guys really learned a little bit and enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a big thumbs up. And also, if you don't want to miss any more crafting videos like this, be sure to click that subscribe button on screen. And also, you can check out my blog for a full supplies list of everything we used, and as well as lots more pictures and information. So thanks for stopping by for this little video, and I hope you guys will have a great day.